This is the Extra Point Podcast. During this podcast, we will dive deeper into our Sunday teaching and share practical next steps for your faith journey. Now, let's kick off the Extra Point.
Well, hey, welcome to the Extra Point. I'm Cheryl Ross, the Next Steps and Discipleship Pastor, and this is Scott Beha, our lead pastor, and we are going to dive deeper into our Sunday teaching. But first, I want to make sure that if you haven't liked or subscribed our channel, if you're watching online or subscribed to this podcast, make sure you do so that way you don't miss any new content that we put out. But Sunday, we were talking about, it was Palm Sunday.
Yep.
All right, which is the beginning of what we call Holy Week. Just really quickly, for those who maybe it's their first time tuning in and they're not really sure what that is, like, tell us what Holy Week is all about.
So Holy Week is the week that the church celebrates what happened the last week of Jesus's earthly life before his resurrection. And so that encompasses Sunday, Palm Sunday, which, and this is all something that I've really come to understand and appreciate that I didn't know early on in ministry, that there would be years that I would just kind of neglect Palm Sunday and just go like, yeah, we're in a teaching series, so we're just going to do whatever we want.
Mm-hmm.
We're at church, it's got to be good enough. But now I realize, there's actually a rhythm to all of this that the church is meant to walk through every year,
Mm-hmm.
which is why, I'm really glad that we have a Good Friday service here, because we didn't, for a really long
Right.
time. We always did, Church of God people do Maundy Thursday, because one of our ordinances is foot washing, which not all parts of Christianity see foot washing on the same level that the Church of God does. I appreciate that about the Church of God. So we've always been Maundy Thursday people and very rarely Good Friday people. It was hard. I think I knew of one Church of God around the area that really did it. And so I'm glad that we have that, because now we get to set up our Holy Week experience to really follow what took place. And so we have our Palm Sunday where we do celebrate the fact that Jesus is King. That's what Palm Sunday really should be focused on, is the fact that they held Jesus as King that day that he rode into Jerusalem. And without a doubt, some people in the crowd that cried Hosanna on that Sunday were the same people Friday morning that shouted crucify him, which is wild how quick of a turn that was. And so we start Holy Week with Palm Sunday and the enthronement of Jesus as King. And then Thursday, we celebrate Maundy Thursday. We do foot washing, because that's what Jesus did. We do communion. Those are two of the things that we do on Thursday. And then Friday, we go through the Good Friday experience. And this is something that I'm growing and learning in as well. It's like the Good Friday service, when we first started it, it would just kind of be like a pretty happy, upbeat, cross-focused, but still really upbeat. And what I'm coming to learn is actually that should be a much more somber type service that really gets to the heart of the pain of the cross, so the way we can all feel that. And the more that we can feel that pain and that sorrow of Friday night, the more sweet then Sunday morning becomes on resurrection morning. And so that's kind of the journey that we're meant to walk yearly through Holy Week.
Yeah. Now, I loved how you talked about how this was really going to be one of the hardest week of Jesus's life.
Yeah,
and
in some sense, yeah.
It started out great, but obviously it didn't, on Friday, it didn't seem to end well for him, what everybody else kind of experienced. He knew what was ahead. He knew that Sunday was still going to come. But I think when you talked about that and how he got on the donkey, knowing what was ahead of him, knowing the cross was ahead of him, he still sat down and rode in that day because he knew what was on the other side of it, not just for him, but for us. And it just made me think a lot about our own lives, how what can seem like the very worst experience of our life can actually end up bringing something new and something good on the other side of it.
Yeah.
And I just thought about you and some of your story, how you've seen that, So share with us about an experience or a time that you have felt that or experienced that very thing within your life.
Yeah, well, I think that there's like a temptation to minimize what Jesus went through because he
Right.
knew it was coming. Because he knew Sunday was coming, like everything else was kind of easy to get through. That's not really the case, because all of us know in our life the best things in life don't come easy. It's actually you have to pass through the hard stuff. All of us know that the life that we always have wanted is just on the other side of going through something really difficult. But most of us don't make that decision. So, like, to sit there and minimize it, to say, oh, well, Jesus knew he was going to resurrect, so Thursday and Friday wasn't really that big of a deal. It would be the same as, like, someone that's overweight going, like, oh, I mean, if I know on the other side I'm going to be skinny, I mean, that hard work in the middle, that's no problem whatsoever.
Right.
Well, then why don't you do it?
Right.
Because you know that it was still going to be hard, even though he knew how it was going to end. So we have a tendency to minimize that. And so, like, for us, everything that we want is probably on the other side of something really difficult. And most of us are not willing to pay the price in those areas of our life to do it. That's why most people stay unhealthy. That's why they stay broke. That's why they stay in bad relationships. All of this because what we ultimately want most is just on the other side of going through something really difficult. And that's for me, like my own personal story that you were mentioning. Like, if it was not for the horrible things that I've had to endure personally, I would not be where I am right now whatsoever. And so there's a sanctifying effect to the difficulties that we go through. And it's those things that we normally try to fight against the most. Those are the things that we normally, we want God to keep the bad far, far away from us. And truth be told, that's actually the best way for us to grow in any way is through pain and through stress. That's actually how, in the gym, that's actually how your muscles actually grow. It's through stress put on your muscle, and then it's in the time of recovery that the muscle actually grows. So if you actually never go through stressful times whatsoever in your life, then you'll never have any opportunity to grow, because you don't actually grow when things are good. You'll only grow when things are painful, when you've been stressed. And when you've been stretched, that's when growth actually begins to occur. And so, I'm thankful, even though I fight back against it as much as anybody, I am thankful that life is not always good.
Yeah, that's so good. So you kind of started us out with this question that came from Peter's declaration about Jesus and who Jesus is. And you said our answer to the question, who is Jesus in our life, will really determine how we live and how, how things, how it affects our walk, our own discipleship journey. And let's unpack that a little bit more, because I thought this was such a good point. And kind of just talk about how when we view Jesus as just a teacher, like how that might influence the way we live, or how we see him as other ways, how that might influence the way we live.
This is something that C.S. Lewis really put really great language to, and I think that it's something that we all have to come to terms with. So C.S. Lewis talked about that when it comes to Jesus, that he either is a liar, he's either a lunatic, or he's Lord. He can only be one of those three things. And he makes it clear. He has this brilliant quote that I've used in sermons multiple times, but he says, if he was a liar, then like you can't go around saying he was a good teacher, because anyone that's a liar is not a good teacher. If he was a lunatic, he can't be someone that can be trusted. He can't be just a good teacher if he's a lunatic. If he said one crazy thing that wasn't true, that like you have to completely ignore everything else that he said. And so that's where C.S. Lewis just puts these categories to. It's like it has to be one of these three things. He's either a liar, he's not who he says he was. He's either a lunatic, he actually maybe he was unstable, which is what his family thought. Outside of his mom, probably. His brothers clearly thought that he had some issues until after they saw him raised from the dead. Or he is the Lord of all creation. He can only be one of those three things. Because it's so patronizing to go, oh, Jesus was a good teacher. I just I know a friend that's I don't know if he would consider himself atheist or whatnot. I went to college with him, and I remember a Facebook post that he put about how he was so thankful that his parents brought him up to respect all the teachers of religion like Jesus and Buddha and all these, and like he put Jesus in this list of like good teachers that like follow his advice and life will be good. And I thought, wow, that's an interesting thing to think, because like on one sense, like sure, I think that if you go and live out the Sermon on the Mount, your life will be better. Sure, I fully believe that. But at the same time, you're kind of living like a really ridiculous sort of life to say like, oh, I want to follow the Sermon on the Mount, which was given by a guy that said, eat my flesh and drink my blood. I am the Son of God. I am God. I am one with the Father, who said that he was the one that the whole Old Testament was written about. Like, how do you take that Sermon on the Mount and say that it came from this and be like, oh, well, that's trustworthy then? Like that, it makes no sense to me whatsoever for those two things to be true. And that's why who you say that Jesus is the defining thing in your life. And there's no other option other than he's a liar, he's a lunatic, or he's the Lord. That's it. Those are your only three options. He did not leave the door open. This is what C.S. Lewis says. He did not leave open the option for him to be anything else.
Right.
Oh, he's just a good moral teacher. No. If he claimed to be God and he was a liar, he's not a good moral person whatsoever. The only way that anything that Jesus of Nazareth said makes any sense is if he actually is God, if he actually is Israel's Messiah, and he actually is the King of all creation. That's the only way. If you don't believe that about him, you should not listen to anything that he says whatsoever, because that makes you an inconsistent person. The reason why I don't follow other religions and other teachings from other people is I don't find them to be trustworthy. Right, and so I don't just go and take the pieces that I like, because if the source of something is not trustworthy, then whatever is said, for the most part, should not be seen as trustworthy either. And so that's why you have to decide who Jesus really is. And then who you end up saying he is, you have to live consistent with that. So don't come with this, Jesus is Lord, like saying Jesus is Lord because that's the right answer. It is the right answer. But if you're not serious about making Jesus Lord, then don't say that. Like, and when I say Jesus is Lord, like, he has to be the one that's in charge. He has to be the one that's directing your life. Like, when you say Jesus is Lord, you are saying that everyone else is not, including yourself. And there's just too many people that call themselves Christians that don't live like that. It's very frustrating. For me, not that I don't have love for those types of people. It's just frustrating because, like, for me, if I wasn't going to go all in, I wouldn't go at all. Like, I would do so many other things with my life. I would go and be selfish, and I would spend my money on the most lavish vacations and shoes and all. I mean, I would not sit here and play Christian just to save face. And I don't understand why people do it at all, because at the moment that I decided that Jesus was in charge, it meant that I was not. And that doesn't mean that I'm living this thing out perfectly, like, oh, yeah, I never take back over control and do stupid crap from time to time. No, I do.
But that's not your goal.
That's not my goal, though. Yeah, like, I'm not saying that I don't slip into my flesh every once in a while and have a moment of stupidity. But I'm saying if your whole life is just you in charge, then he's not Lord in your life, and you're playing games. And that's the most dangerous game. That's what we were talking about in our last series. That group of people that's sitting there playing that game, a lot of them don't know they're playing it, and they're playing the world's most dangerous game. They're the people that on the day of judgment, the Lord's going to look at them, and they're going to say, Lord, Lord, didn't we do all this stuff? And he's going to say, depart from me. I never knew you. And they're going to have the worst surprise of their life. And the whole time, they thought everything was fine. And I'm terrified of those people. I think that's why, like, the Lord has me where I'm at, because right here in the center of the Bible Belt, our churches are full of people like that. And I feel like more so than like you know how God gives people specific ministries, like in Scripture, like Peter was supposed to open up the door to the Gentiles, and then Paul was going to go and spread like that was his specific audience. And I think there are people that are really good at like reaching like post-Christian societies, like people that go and do ministry in Portland or up in New England, places that are mainly atheists and stuff. God puts very specific people there. I think God has put me in the center of the Bible Belt here in West Virginia simply because there's so many cultural Christians that claim that Jesus is Lord but don't live like it. That's my specific mission in life, is to get as much of the church saved as possible.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds crazy, but that's That's what I feel like God has asked me to do with my life, is to get the church saved.
Mm-hmm.
And I know people are like, what do you mean get the church ain't already saved? I'm saying the people in the church are one of the greatest mission fields that we have right now. If you can shake some of them awake into new life, I think that you could start a whole revival just of people that are already in your churches.
Yeah.
That's why, like, what was it in the Christian Atheist we read as a staff a couple years ago? He was talking about how one of the signs that a lot of people put on their doors as people leave is you are now entering the mission field. And, like, the way that I see our church and other churches in the Bible Belt is that sign should be flipped the other way. That when we walk in here on Sunday, that we're actually entering into the mission field as well, because there's so many people that need to be shaken alive in Christ in our church every single week.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. I think, like, growing up in this area, you see that and realize that more than anything when you're within it. I know so many people that are like, yeah, I just believe this just because it's what's always taught to me. You know, that's what my parents believe. That's whatever. But they don't really understand, like, the scripture. Like, they don't understand any of it, and they don't live like it.
Oh, I mean, I will see people that are just outright living in sin. They have no acknowledgement of Jesus other than when they need him. And they'll, like, message me for prayer. They'll post stuff about God on their Facebook and stuff. And I'm like, but you're not really following Jesus. Right. You're just taking these cultural aspects of it when it fits into what you need.
Yep.
Like, and that's why the Lord has, like, laid that on my heart so heavy, is like these folks, they're sleeping. They don't see it whatsoever. And it's so dangerous, because if you're outright just like anti-God, you know that. And so you know that, like, but, like, if you're, like, riding the fence, you don't know which camp you fall into, because you have self-deceived yourself enough into feeling comfortable right where you're at.
Yeah.
And that's why that group is so hard to get to actually make a movement towards God, because they already think that they have.
Right. And I think it's part of that, embracing those few things that you said that you will have if you follow Jesus. You'll have that rejection and that death, but you'll also have that resurrection. And I think too often we get caught up in the rejection, or we get caught up in the death aspect. We forget that there's resurrection on the other side of it. Like, we forget that there, like, yes, we're going to experience some of those things, but, like, also there's something better that we're going to also experience. And we forget that, you know, it's tough. Yeah, it's hard. But, like, going without that is way harder for me. I would take rejection, death, whatever, 100% over not having the resurrection side of it that I have today. But so many people have never fully experienced that resurrection side, so they don't even realize what they're missing.
Yeah, and this is part of my own personal story, is I always thought by following Jesus I would miss out on things. And I'll tell you, one of the most helpful things that I ever listened to, Tim Keller, you can still find this out on the internet. This was probably back in, like, 2012. Tim Keller preached a sermon called "A Spirit Hath Not Flesh and Bones," where he talked about, it was an Easter sermon from probably a decade ago now, about how the life in the new creation, how physical it will be, that, like, whatever you think that you're going to miss out on in this life, you're actually not going to miss out on anything, because the greatest experience that you can have now will be nothing in comparison to the experiences that you will have in the new creation. So if you feel like oh man, I'm afraid to take this Jesus thing so serious, because what if I miss out on, like, good food and good drink and good sex and good experience and all this stuff that you're afraid to miss out on, like the promise of the new creation is all those experiences. What you will experience in the new creation will be greater than any experience that you can have in this life. So you won't actually miss out on anything. I'm not saying it's a one-for-one type.
Right.
Like, they're going to have this experience here and it'll just be better. I'm not saying that. I'm saying your overall experience of fulfillment in the new creation will be so much more satisfying than anything that you find satisfying right now. And so that sermon that he preached on that Easter, it's called "A Spirit Hath Not Flesh and Bone," and it's all about, you will not actually miss out. You will not miss out. If you give 70 years of your life to full-hearted following of Jesus now, you will never regret it, not for 1 second in the new heavens and the new earth, because everything will be given back. More so. There will be such a fulfillment. There will be such a satisfaction. So, like, people that are living right now like this is all there is, you don't understand what is awaiting you for those who will truly follow Jesus.
Yeah. Now, from verse 23, it says that if you want to be my follower, you must give up your own way, take up your cross daily, and follow me. And in your teaching, which if you haven't listened to that, I really encourage you all to go back and listen, because you fleshed these 3 things out so well and gave us some real practical examples of what it looks like in our life about giving up our own way, about taking up your cross daily, and what it means to follow him. And so one of the things you talked about, that the one point that I really want to hit on more, is that following him, that living a life-giving life.
Yeah.
Because I think ultimately, I mean, that's how we take that out into the world, into the places that we go. And so what are some ways, I know you gave us kind of one example, but what are some ways that we can do that within our life, within our spaces that we enter in every day?
Yeah, so one simple, really simple next step. The Proverbs tell us that your tongue has the ability to give life or to take life. So you can live a life-giving life by watching the way that you speak to people.
Yeah.
That's one quick change.
Yeah.
The way that you speak to people will either build them up and give them life, or it will take away from them. If you're a follower of Jesus, your words should be giving life, should be building up, should be blessing, should not be tearing down. That encompasses a great deal of our life, because Jesus even says that the words that you speak are a direct reflection of your heart. And like a lot of times, and this is why I try to make it so clear in that sermon, like the next step was not just to sign up for Beauty Day. Like, sure, you should do that, but like, take the essence of Beauty Day and go live that out. That was the next step. That was the actual application, which was like, don't just like, some people are just looking for a mission trip to go on to say, oh, that's me following Jesus.
Yeah.
No, like, you following Jesus is when you're upset with someone, or when something happens that you don't agree with, rather than speaking negatively about your boss, rather than speaking negatively about the city that you live in, rather than speaking negatively about decisions that were made that you don't agree with, how about you let your mouth build people up, speak positive, even in times where in your heart you're going, oh, I don't agree with this. And I'm not saying that we just become people that don't ever share hard truths or anything like that. That's clearly not the case. But Christians are, what we say is a reflection of our heart. And so if everything out of your mouth is criticism, everything is tearing people down, everything is gossip, everything is foul, then something is not right in your heart. And so that's one of the easiest changes that you can make is the words that I'm saying building people up, or are the words that I'm saying tearing people down? Am I giving life? Am I taking life? And then you put that into all of your actions. It's like, okay, how do I follow Jesus at work? Okay, I want to bring life to work. Be a good employee. That's life-giving for the people around you. I'm sorry, to be a bad employee and to be a Christian is an oxymoron. That's just, to be a bad employee and a Christian is an oxymoron. Because everything we do, we've been told in the Colossians, do everything as if you were doing it for the Lord, because in fact you are. So like, being a good employee is following Jesus. Showing up on time, being someone that's dependable, having a character that can be trusted, that's following Jesus. Speaking life-giving words, that's following Jesus. Meeting people's needs, that's following Jesus. This is how we do this in everyday life, and anyone can do this. You don't have to be a pastor to do this. In fact, it's probably harder on us to do this because we don't have the same access to people that have regular jobs do. They don't. Like I've worked 4 days now in the public schools. That's given me more access to show the love of Jesus to people than what I get in a normal day here, because I'm up here with y'all, a bunch of Christians up here, right? Like, I'm trying to, I'm showing love. Like, we show love to each other here. We're not tearing each other down and stuff like that. But like everybody up here's saved. I'm saying whenever people that have regular jobs, you work in a hospital, man, you have so much opportunity to live a life-giving life to people that are coming into the emergency room, or if you're a school teacher, all that opportunity that you have. If you're a coach, if you're a whatever you are, you have such an opportunity to bring life to people, and that's what it looks like.
Yeah.
Because too many people got taught a version of Christianity that was all about all the things that you should stop doing. Oh, don't cuss, don't drink, don't smoke, don't chew, and don't run with girls that do, right? That's the version of Christianity that so many people got.
I don't think
and
I
it was
heard
all
that.
about, you never heard of it before? And
Sorry.
they were all told, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, and no one ever said, but don't just not do that stuff. Find the inverse of that, man. Like go and love people, like genuinely love people. Like don't complain about the homeless issue in your city. Like I've seen Christians berate our mayor here in Charleston over Christians berating our mayor over homeless issues rather than going and actually being the hands and feet of Jesus.
Yeah.
Or Christians that are fed up with the addiction and drug. Well, go and do something about it. Because the version of Christianity that you were taught was that you're okay as long as you're not the one doing the drugs. No, the version of Christianity was, no, you probably definitely should not do drugs, but maybe you should also go find people that are doing drugs and help them and love them. So it's a stop and a start.
Yeah.
That's what following Jesus looks like.
Yeah.
And sometimes we only focus on one of those. Like if you get in really really conservative type churches, they will focus on all the stuff that you shouldn't do and sometimes forget the stuff you should do. You get in more liberal churches, they focus on all the stuff that you should do without ever focusing on the stuff that you shouldn't do.
Right.
And you have to have a mix of both of that. You have to have a mix of dying to yourself daily, picking up your cross, and then following Jesus. It has to be both of those. And so there's extremes on both sides of the church that are very unhealthy. And somewhere in the messy middle is where true transformation actually happens as I'm getting rid of this stuff. That's the old me. This Colossians 3, the taking off and the putting on of the old. These are the things that lead to death. These are the things that lead to life. It's the taking off and the putting on.
Yeah.
That's really what we're called to, and you can't just focus on one or the other, because you'll get some that are super moral people, but they're a disaster to deal with, and serve no purpose of helping humanity whatsoever. And then you have some that they're all about social justice and reform and helping the least of these while having horrible character flaws or minimizing the truth of Scripture and things like that. Yeah. And so you can't fall into either one of those traps when it comes to following Jesus. It takes both.
Absolutely. When you were talking about the life-giving life, it reminded me of a book I read years ago called The Life-Giving Leader by Tyler Reagan. Have you read that? And I don't know if it was part of the ordination process or just a book I read because I read it constantly, but it's all about how to learn to lead from your truest self, and it had a lot of really good practical things, but it talks about leadership a lot, and a lot of us may think we're not a leader, but you are. You have influence in spaces that you are in every day, and you have the opportunity to lead. But one of the quotes that I'd wrote down was that leadership isn't easy. It's difficult because it matters. What we do as believers in Jesus Christ really matters. It says it changes people. It's valuable, and things of value require sacrifice. Yeah. I think that's the part that we don't like as people. You don't like to sacrifice things that maybe you want or you desire, and you talked about this within giving up your own way, giving up your own desires, giving up your own things. Things of value require that sacrifice, and that's what Jesus did for us. And so we're just modeling that same kind of sacrifice to say, you know what? I find value in you. Yep. I find value in this. So I'm going to sacrifice and do what I need to do, give up what I need to give up. I mean, we do this in so many other areas of our life. If you value nice shoes, you're going to sacrifice maybe going out and getting coffee so you can save the money to go get you another pair of nice shoes, right? So just making sure that we're putting value on those things by how we're living.
Yeah.
If you're not living in this way, you're not putting the value in it, the same value that was put upon you whenever Jesus sacrificed his own life. And so just things to think about. But if you would like to continue to dive deeper with us into our Sunday teachings every week, this drops on Wednesday every single week. And, of course, follow us for other content from our Sunday teachings. And we just can't wait to help you take more practical next steps in your faith journey.
Thanks for tuning in to The Extra Point. Be sure to subscribe to the Southridge Church podcast and tune in every Wednesday for another episode of The Extra Point.